So I think anybody that works with Clint has always, I think, pretty much been happy with how he treats the script, the respect he has for the writer and the words that are on the page. But sometimes big actors will make changes also. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not so much. So enough about Hollywood. I will have to start drinking whiskey if we keep going. I'm retired and I live in the south of France. So right now, life is good.
All right. In this case, let's not get you drunk. Let's talk about your book. So you wrote this memoir, and as far as I understand, is about the relationship you had with your mother. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, in 2011 is when this thing happened. So I was in Hollywood still, but I had a snack food business. So I was still acting, and I had a snack food business that my brother and I started to honor my dad. He invented a half pop popcorn that was a family secret for decades. And I decided it was time to treat the world to this because it was a lovely snack that we loved as kids. And then when I started making it out in LA, a lot of people in Hollywood went nuts over it. So that was my main job at that point. And then my brother called. My mom was living in the house we all grew up in New Jersey. And she just kind of, I think, gave up on life. She was not happy in her house and was a bit depressed. And I think she looked around and said, boy, if this is what my life is going to be, I'm done. I'm out of here. So she kind of willed herself to die. And her doctor cut off all meds and food, and hospice was called. And when hospice is called, it's usually not a great outcome. And so she had 6 kids, and we all flew in. My dad passed about 14 years earlier, so she was alone in the house, but we had a family living upstairs that were overseeing household duties and doing the grocery shopping and cooking and stuff for her. My mom was just turned 89. She could still function, but she needed some help with the practical things. And but she just kind of gave up. So she's in bed and kind of, I call it a semi-comatose state. And hospice was there, and they said, there's no meds, no food. Give her a little moisture on her lips to keep her comfortable, but that was it. She's going to transition. So we were all on death watch, and she didn't speak. She barely opened her eyes, but she did respond a little bit to touch. And so I think after a few weeks, she realized that her kids were there, and she started coming out of it. And about 3 weeks later, she actually snapped out of it. One of the hospice nurses broke the rules because there was, again, no food. And she asked my mom if she was hungry. And my mom's, for 3 weeks, has just been laying there doing nothing. And all of a sudden, her eyes popped open like a dinner bell rang. And then the nurse accused us of starving our mother to death, which we were not doing. But since I found out after writing this book and doing a lot of research, that kind of stuff does happen. There's a lot of evil stuff that happens as our loved ones get older, especially if people did not get along with them. So there's some weird stuff that people will do for money and inheritance and all that stuff. So, but that wasn't the case with us. And so we told the lady to call her supervisor, and the supervisor told her to leave. And she did, and another nurse came in. But before that nurse came in, I'm thinking maybe hospice was wrong, and maybe that doctor was wrong, and maybe mom's not ready to go. So I felt really guilty that we weren't giving her any food. So I went in and asked her, and I said, Mom, are you hungry? And she said, well, what do you got? And those were the first words she spoke in about 3 weeks. And I said, well, anything you want. And she said, well, how about some pumpkin pie? At this time, it's now March, and March is not pumpkin pie season in the United States. So I said, okay. And so I went out in the living room. My brother was there, who lived locally, and said, you want to go out and see if you could find some pumpkin pies? And he came back in less than 30 minutes with 2 fresh pumpkin pies. And I gave a spoonful to mom, and she spit out the first spoonful because that was the first food in weeks. And I said, well, that didn't go so well, but let's try again. And so the second spoonful went down, and then she ended up downing half the pie, and that gave her all kinds of energy. She was back. And the next day, she downed the other half. And then I think on the next day, she downed the entire pie, the second pie. But she was back. The color came back in her face. She was alert, and it was like, this is great. So I think, and I have a chapter in the book called A Silent Scream. I think it was a cry for help. She wanted love back in her house and love back in her life. And with all her children being there and now feeding her and caring for her and showing her that we did love and didn't want her to leave. Yeah, so she came back to us at that point.
Wow, that's that's so impressive. Like how the human body can go for 3 weeks without food.
Yep.
That's impressive. Like I'm sure a little bit confused. I'm gonna be honest. How or why any doctors would recommend just not feeding her? How is this
Well,
helpful?
if now I don't know the relationship with her and her doctor, but the doctor never saw her. My brother put her to bed, and she just wasn't responsive to anything. So the doctor heard that and said, "Okay, she's going." At that point, she's 89 years old, and whether this is the American health system or whatever, but
Oh my God.
I didn't think it was a great call, but they're like, well, whatever. Now, hospice, when they come, they're great because, again, they're at least in New Jersey, they're contracted to stay 6 months. But normally, if hospice is called, someone doesn't last that long. But they were really good to my mother, and my younger sister and I hung out with them because we wanted to learn how to take care of our mother for as long as she wanted to be around. So we learned all the tips and tricks from them, how to change the diapers, how to address any medical needs, how to change the bed with a helpless patient in the bed. And it was great. And I think that's what also helped our mother snap out of it. So, um,
Of course, she felt loved, right? She felt taken care of.
yeah,
So
yeah.
man, this other doctor is just like, I think he was depressed himself. Basically, he was like, he was giving up on his life. He didn't care about his job. Like he just assumed that this lady, who was clearly old and not feeling well, was on her deathbed. So he just assumed that's it. Don't do anything. That's kind of irresponsible, right?
Well, I don't know again the whole relationship with them or not
Okay.
between my mom and the doctor. So I don't want to disparage anybody. It was a little cold, let's say, from my opinion, but I don't know the history that built up to that. So there may have been a number of calls like this because my mother did suffer from some depression throughout her life. She hid it very well. Later in life, she hit it less. The filters fade with age. So that's when you get a lot of these grumpy old people who tell the truth.
Yeah, yeah. I was talking with a friend of mine. Like, as you people get older, either they become extremely resentful or extremely kind. Like, there's no in between.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, dude. Mark, I would like to share a story real quick. I think I shared that on the podcast before. So I live in Germany, right? And
Yeah.
as soon as I moved to Germany, that was about 9 years ago. I had something